They told you to be good, to be kind, to be generous. From childhood, society whispers in our ears that kindness is the highest virtue, that being a good person is the key to happiness, love, and respect. Fairy tales end with the kind hero rewarded, the evil punished, and justice shining like sunlight. But what if reality doesn't play by the rules of fairy tales? What if being too good is not a strength, but a fatal weakness? What if kindness, when carried to its extreme, becomes the very reason people overlook you, take advantage of you, and eventually discard you? This is the paradox of kindness. The idea that the very trait we are told will save us can also destroy us. Philosophers, thinkers, and writers across history have warned us about this paradox. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster." His words are often remembered for their dramatic flair, but hidden within them is, kindness is beautiful. Let's be clear about that. Empathy, compassion, the ability to forgive. These are traits that separate us from cruelty and barbarism. But here lies the paradox. When kindness is practiced without boundaries, it ceases to be a virtue. It transforms into a dangerous vulnerability. Think of the person who always says yes, the friend who is always available, no matter what, the employee who never complains, who works extra hours, who sacrifices personal time to please everyone. At first, these people are admired, but with time, they are no longer respected. They are expected. Their kindness becomes invisible, like background noise. And the moment they fail to give, they are criticized, as if their worth only existed in their ability to serve others. This is where Machiavelli's harsh truth echoes. In The Prince, he writes, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." At first glance, this sounds cruel, even heartless. But what Machiavelli was pointing to is human psychology. Love and kindness are fragile currencies. They can vanish the moment interests shift. Fear, on the other hand, commands attention. It creates boundaries. It prevents abuse. Now think of modern life. On social media, how many influencers rise to fame not by being kind, but by being controversial, bold, even ruthless? Meanwhile, the kind voices, the ones that always try to please everyone, get drowned out in the noise. We reward those who stand firm, who dare to say no, who refuse to be endlessly agreeable. The paradox is this: to be truly kind, you must also learn to be ruthless at times. You must learn to say no. Without that edge, kindness is not strength, it is self-destruction. Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." What he meant is that true wholeness requires us to embrace not only the light, but also the shadow. If you reject your inner shadow, your capacity for anger, your ability to defend yourself, your refusal to be exploited, then your kindness is incomplete. It becomes hollow, fake, and exploitable. Look at relationships. Many people believe that if they are endlessly kind, their partner will love them more. But often, the opposite happens. Excessive kindness leads to imbalance. The partner loses respect, attraction fades, and resentment grows. Why? Because love thrives not only on kindness, but on respect, boundaries, and sometimes even conflict. True intimacy is not built on constant agreement, but on authenticity, even when it's uncomfortable. Nietzsche again gives us a brutal reminder. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. If your why is simply to be liked by others, your kindness will be shallow and self-destructive. But if your why is rooted in authenticity and self-respect, then your kindness becomes real, not weakness, but controlled strength. This is why being too good can actually destroy you. Not because kindness itself is bad, but because kindness without strength, without shadow, without limits, becomes invisible. We grow up being told that kindness is the glue of society. Be polite, be respectful, help others, and everything will somehow balance itself out. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Societies have always weaponized kindness, not as a virtue for the individual, but as a tool of control. Think about it. Why do religions, governments, schools, and even corporations constantly push the message of be good, be humble, sacrifice yourself for the greater good? It's not because they care about your happiness. It's because a population that is endlessly good is easier to control. Take Nietzsche's idea of slave morality. He argued that the weak, unable to overpower the strong, invented morality as a leash. Phrases like, turn the other cheek, or the meek shall inherit the earth, sound noble, but behind them lies a power play. If the strong believe kindness is the highest virtue, they'll stop using their strength. That way, the weak win without ever lifting a sword. Nietzsche called it out for what it really was, a strategy. Now, let's translate this into modern life. Look at the corporate world. How many times have you heard phrases like, we're a family here, or just go the extra mile? Teamwork makes the dream work. These slogans sound like kindness in action, but really, they are psychological tricks. They guilt you into overworking, underpaid, while the CEO buys his third vacation home. You think you're being kind to your team, when in reality, you're being exploited by a system that thrives on your inability to say no. Or take social media. Notice how platforms reward bold, outrageous, and controversial content. The people who gain followers aren't the nice guys, politely sharing good vibes. They're the ones who dare to provoke, challenge, and sometimes even offend. The algorithm doesn't care about kindness. It cares about engagement. And outrage is engagement on steroids. Meanwhile, the kind, quiet voices fade into digital oblivion. And this goes even deeper. Society subtly mocks kindness. How many times have you heard the phrase, nice guys finish last? It's not just a meme. It's a reflection of how the world actually works. The too kind person in relationships becomes the doormat. The too kind student in class becomes the one everyone copies homework from. The too kind worker at the office becomes the unpaid therapist for the whole team. And here's the kicker. People respect those who set boundaries, not those who endlessly give. That's why Machiavelli's harsh truth still bites today. In The Prince, he wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose. At first glance, it feels cruel, even heartless. But look at the modern world. Politicians, influencers, CEOs, those who hold real power are not those who are loved for their kindness. They are those who are respected, feared, or at least recognized for their strength. Love without respect collapses into pity, but respect, even tinged with fear, creates influence. Let's use an example. Imagine two managers at work. Manager A is endlessly kind, always saying yes, always accommodating. Manager B is fair, but strict. Who do employees obey? Who do they complain about behind their back? Manager A gets liked, sure, but employees walk all over them. Manager B, maybe feared a little, but respected. Who do you think gets promoted faster? That's Machiavelli's lesson playing out in real time. And the paradox is this. True kindness, the kind that actually has weight, cannot exist without power behind it. If your kindness isn't backed by the ability to say no, to enforce boundaries, to walk away, it's not kindness. It's weakness dressed up in virtue. Society will never tell you this, because society benefits from your blind kindness. Schools want obedient students, not rebels. Jobs want compliant workers, not boundary setters. Governments want citizens who believe in self-sacrifice, not ones who ask uncomfortable questions. So, every time you hear that little cultural whisper, Just be kind. Pause for a second. Ask yourself, is this kindness making me free, or is it making me easier to control? Carl Jung had this wild idea called the shadow, the hidden, dark side of our personality that we prefer to deny. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Kindness has a shadow too. Every time you overdo kindness, every time you suppress anger, every time you avoid conflict, just to keep the peace, that shadow grows. And sooner or later, it explodes. Picture this. You're the friend who always says yes. Need help moving? You're there. Need to borrow money? You're the ATM. Need emotional support at 3 a.m.? Call you. At first, people think, wow, what a saint. But inside, you're building silent resentment. You're feeding your shadow. And then one day, boom, you snap. You ghost everyone. Or worse, you explode on the very people you tried to save. That's not kindness anymore. That's suppressed rage disguised in polite smiles. Jung would say, when you only live in the light, you deny the shadow. But denying the shadow doesn't make it disappear, it makes it stronger. The too kind person often ends up with the darkest breakdowns. Look at relationships. Ever heard of the nice partner who gives, until one day they just cheat or leave without explanation? That's the shadow of kindness. They were so obsessed with being agreeable, they forgot to be honest. And honesty, sometimes brutal honesty, is healthier than fake kindness stretched until it breaks. Even society shows this. Think of politicians who brand themselves as men of the people, so kind, so approachable. And then scandal, corruption, lies. The bigger the mask of kindness, the darker the shadow behind it. The louder someone shouts, I'm good, the more suspicious you should be. Because real kindness doesn't need PR, it just acts. And here's where it gets dangerous. Too much kindness can actually turn cruel. Imagine a parent who never disciplines their kid, always saying yes, never setting limits. It feels like kindness in the short term, but in the long term, it raises entitled, fragile adults who can't handle reality. That's not kindness. It's sabotage dressed as love. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Translated, true kindness isn't about pretending you're an angel. It's about facing the fact that you also have a devil inside, that you can hurt, manipulate, lie. And the more you deny it, the more those tendencies control you from the shadows. Let's make it brutally simple. The person who says, I'm always kind is lying, because kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being disliked. And fear is the shadow's favorite weapon. So what do? You integrate it. You admit that sometimes you want to say no, sometimes you want to walk away, sometimes you want to scream. And instead of burying that, you own it. You channel it. That's how kindness gets teeth. That's how kindness stops being weakness and becomes choice. Think of it like a sword. If you're always swinging it recklessly, you're cruel. But if you refuse to even hold it, you're defenseless. Real strength? Carrying the sword, knowing you could cut, and still choosing when to sheath it. That's kindness with power. That's the shadow integrated. There's a dark irony in kindness. The very thing meant to connect us can also destroy us. When kindness crosses a line, it stops being virtue and becomes self-sabotage. Think about the classic people pleaser. At first, they seem like the glue of every group. They say yes to every request. They absorb every burden. They smile through exhaustion. But slowly, their identity dissolves. They no longer know what they want, because their life is just a reflection of other people's demands. That isn't kindness. It's a slow suicide of the self. Look at the workplace. There's always that one employee who never complains, who takes the extra shifts, who covers for others. Management loves them, coworkers depend on them. But one day they crash. Burnout, depression, maybe even hospitalization. And suddenly, everyone is shocked. But they were so kind, so reliable. Exactly. They gave until there was nothing left. Kindness killed them. Machiavelli would smirk here. He argued that rulers who try to be loved above all else end up destroyed. Why? Because when you place everyone else's happiness above your own survival, you make yourself a pawn in their game. And pawns are the first to fall. His harsh truth still holds. Excessive kindness is a liability, not a strength. Even in love, the same pattern appears. How many relationships collapse because one partner is too kind? They give and give, never argue, never set boundaries. On the surface, that looks like devotion. But underneath, it breeds resentment, imbalance, even exploitation. The so-called kind partner becomes invisible, and invisibility is the slowest form of death. And here's the brutal paradox. Society often rewards this self-destructive kindness. The martyr, the self-sacrificing friend, the always available coworker. They get applause, likes, and praise. But behind the curtain, their soul is collapsing. They're being eaten alive by expectations. They're training everyone around them to take more and more until there's nothing left to take. Let's be clear. Kindness without boundaries is not noble, it's dangerous. It creates toxic cycles. The too kind person teaches others to exploit them and then blames themselves when they finally break. That's not morality. That's slavery disguised as virtue. History is full of these stories. Think of leaders, activists, even saints who gave everything for others and ended up destroyed by the very people they tried to help. Their kindness lit the fire, but that same fire consumed them. Nietzsche once said, "Beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster." We could adapt that. Beware that when trying to be endlessly kind, you do not destroy yourself in the process. Because when kindness becomes self-destruction, it's no longer kindness at all. It's a slow, silent form of violence against yourself. So here's the question no one asks. Is your kindness truly kindness, or is it fear in disguise? Fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, fear of not being good enough. Because if kindness comes from fear, it's poison. If it comes from strength, it's medicine. The difference? Boundaries. Saying yes when it aligns with your values. Saying no when it threatens your sanity. Without that line, kindness becomes a weapon turned inward. Niccolò Machiavelli, the political thinker who has been both feared and misunderstood for centuries, had a simple but uncomfortable insight. The world does not reward kindness by default. In fact, blind kindness can make you vulnerable. Machiavelli argued that if a ruler, or by extension any individual, tries to be good all the time, they will inevitably be destroyed by those who are not bound by the same rules. Let's pause here, because this is where most people recoil. They think, so you're telling me I shouldn't be a good person? That's not the message. Machiavelli never said be evil. What he said was, don't be naive. He warned us that when kindness is turned into a rigid principle, when it becomes something you cling to regardless of circumstance, it stops being a virtue and becomes a liability. Think about it. If you always forgive, you will eventually be exploited by someone who counts on your forgiveness. If you always say yes, people will use you until there's nothing left. If you always put others first, you will eventually disappear from your own life. This is not morality. This is martyrdom dressed up as virtue. Machiavelli believed that real strength lies in flexibility. To be kind when kindness works, but to be firm when firmness is necessary. To forgive when forgiveness rebuilds trust, but to punish when punishment prevents chaos. To adapt, because life is not a fairy tale where good deeds are automatically rewarded. It is a battlefield where strategies matter more than intentions. And here is where it gets even harsher. Machiavelli famously wrote that it is safer to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. Why? Because love is fragile. People's emotions change. Admiration today can turn into envy tomorrow. Affection can evaporate with one disagreement. But respect, especially respect earned by firmness and boundaries, lasts. Respect is what stops people from crossing the line. Respect is the invisible shield that love alone cannot provide. This doesn't mean you should live by fear, but it means you must understand that kindness without respect is useless. It is like giving away treasures to those who see no value in them. Worse, it teaches others that your resources, your time, your energy, your patience are free to take. And once people learn this lesson, they will never unlearn it. They will keep coming back, not out of love, not out of admiration, but out of habit. So here's the brutal truth Machiavelli would whisper into your ear. If you insist on being good at all costs, you will not survive. The world doesn't play fair. It rewards those who know when to bend the rules, when to stand firm, and when to use kindness strategically, not endlessly. Kindness without wisdom is not kindness at all. It's weakness disguised as virtue. In the end, Machiavelli challenges us to redefine what it means to be good. True kindness is not about self-sacrifice to the point of destruction. It is about protecting your value while offering generosity with intention. It's about choosing kindness as a tool, not as a chain. That is how you honor both yourself and the people around you, without turning into the victim of your own goodness. So now the question is, how do we actually live this balance? How do we practice kindness without turning ourselves into doormats? The answer is not about rejecting kindness. It's about upgrading it. It's about transforming kindness from a reflex into a conscious strategy. The first step is boundaries. Real kindness starts with self-respect. You cannot pour water from an empty cup, and you cannot offer genuine kindness if you are constantly drained. Saying no is not cruelty. It is clarity. It tells the world, my time, my energy, and my dignity have value. People who respect you will adjust. People who don't were never really on your side anyway. The second step is discernment. Not everyone deserves the same version of you. This doesn't mean being fake. It means being intelligent. A wise person knows when to be generous and when to withhold. They know when a handout teaches gratitude and when it teaches dependence. This is the difference between kindness as strength and kindness as weakness. The third step is posture. How you carry yourself matters more than you think. You can be the most caring person in the room, but if your tone, body language, and presence scream insecurity, your kindness will be mistaken for submission. Project strength first, and your kindness will feel like a choice, not a weakness. Remember what Machiavelli said, people judge more by appearances than by reality. The fourth step is adaptability. Life is fluid, unpredictable, unfair. If you cling to one rigid way of being, you will be shattered by the first storm. But if you adapt, like Ulysses resisting the sirens, like the bamboo that bends without breaking, you turn kindness into a weapon of resilience. You learn when to forgive, when to resist, when to step back, when to strike. That's not hypocrisy. That's survival with integrity. And finally, the fifth step, choose respect over affection. In relationships, at work, in friendships, the people who last are not those who try to be loved by everyone, but those who command respect. Affection fades. Respect endures. When you are respected, your kindness becomes more powerful because it is seen as generosity, not desperation. Let's put it bluntly. Kindness without strength is slavery. Kindness with strength is leadership. You don't have to abandon your good heart. You have to arm it. You have to pair it with boundaries, intelligence, and adaptability so it doesn't get crushed under the weight of a cruel world. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to be the good person at all costs, your kindness becomes more authentic. It becomes rarer, sharper, more valuable, because it's not automatic. It's chosen, it's deliberate, and that's the kind of kindness that actually changes people, because it comes from power, not from fear. So here we are, after walking through Machiavelli's harsh truths, Nietzsche's warnings, and the reality of our own lives, we arrive at the paradox of kindness. If you are kind without wisdom, you will be destroyed. But if you combine kindness with strength, you become unstoppable. This is the difference between naive goodness and powerful goodness. Naive goodness is a candle in the wind, beautiful but fragile. Powerful goodness is a torch. It lights the way, it burns obstacles, and it cannot be ignored. Machiavelli taught us that to rule, to lead, to survive, you must be feared if you cannot be loved. Nietzsche warned us against becoming victims of our own compassion. And modern psychology proves that people respect strength far more than blind generosity. The world may not always reward your kindness, but it will always test it. So what do? You transform your kindness into a choice, not a weakness. You become the person who can say yes or no with equal confidence. You learn to forgive, but not to forget. You show compassion, but never at the cost of your dignity. That's the art of living in a world that is often cruel, but still worth fighting for. Because here's the truth. The world doesn't need fewer kind people. It needs fewer weak people pretending that being kind means being powerless. It needs men and women who can carry both the sword and the olive branch, who can protect themselves and still choose to be generous. So the next time you feel guilty for saying no, remember this. You're not rejecting kindness. You're protecting it. You're ensuring that when you give, it actually matters. If this reflection on the paradox of kindness made you rethink how you live, how you love, and how you set your boundaries, then carry it with you today. And if you want more insights like this, consider subscribing. Not because I want followers, but because maybe together we can build a space where kindness doesn't have to mean weakness anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that's the lesson Machiavelli would respect the most. Not to abandon kindness, but to weaponize it, to make it unbreakable. Because in the end, true kindness is not about being liked. It's about being remembered.